It's been 2 weeks. It's felt a little bit more like 2 months, hasn't it? But League One football is back as Lincoln City host Northampton Town. Can the Imps return to the top of the League One table? It's good to be back, isn't it? Hello there, along, and welcome to another episode of Lincoln City's pre-match show, Matchday Live. The Imps hosting Northampton Town, of course, looking to do the double over the Cobblers. A lot to get through on today's show, so let's get straight to it. Of course, we've got 2 games to look back on as well, but we'll bring the usual suspect, Gary Hutchinson, straight into the fold. Gary, great to see you. The match days are back. I said it before, I'll say it again. It's felt like a long time out, hasn't it? Even though it's only been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has felt like a long time out. I quite enjoyed last Saturday waiting to see which of our rivals might lose without the pressure of us chasing a win. But there's nothing like getting stuck in some Lincoln action. Can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it was a disappointment midweek in terms of that postponement, Gary. But from a fitness point of view, at least, refreshing the squad, could it be of a benefit this afternoon?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes people might find it a little bit harsh when you're talking about a benefit of a match being called off and kind of how it affects the squad positively. But I think it does. One would imagine that we look relatively full strength today. I think Rob Makepeace tweeted that there was 2 players who wouldn't make it. And a full strength Lincoln City is an automatic promotion chase in Lincoln City. So it's certainly been a positive, I think.
Yeah, certainly. We're going to be talking about the opponents, Northampton Town, throughout the show, no doubt about that. But in terms of them, Gary, it took a bit of a pasting, didn't they, a month or so ago? Are they coming to the LNER Stadium with a bit of a point to prove this afternoon?
Yeah, 100%. If you look back over history, I think it's very rare that a team takes a pasting in one game and then does the same again in the return fixture, even when we've been on the end of it as well. So I think it'll be a cagier affair. They're not at home. Remember, they had fans in the stadium when they lost 4-0, so there was a certain pressure on them. I remember them getting jeered on 78 minutes for their first effort on goal. That won't happen today. They're going to be tough, compact. They're going to be resolute. I think it's going to be a challenging game.
Topic this afternoon, guys, is regarding, of course, transfers. Want to hear from you as ever, as well as getting your score and score predictions onto the show and letting us know where you're watching Matchday Live from, which, of course, I'll do my best to read out throughout the show. This is today's question in hand, or today's topic in hand. It's what's your favourite Lincoln City mid-season signing? We're saying mid-season. We're keeping it fairly open-ended because, of course, there's been a change in the ruling over the years, hasn't there, in terms of the January transfer window. But whether it's a loan, whether it's a permanent signing, want to know who your favourite Lincoln City mid-season signing is and why. And Gary Hutchinson, I'll put that one straight to you.
The one that springs instantly to mind is David Sommer in the 2009-10 season. I think we were looking relatively doomed. Sommer came in and he was just a class above, scoring goals for fun. So he certainly springs to mind in what I would class as the kind of modern era of the January transfer window.
Yeah, because especially in the Football League, as we well know, and particularly in a division such as League One, I mean, it's a pivotal time, isn't it? I know it's tough with COVID-19, but all clubs across the board will be looking at this period as really massive in terms of getting some new heads and freshening things up a bit, and none more so than Lincoln City, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It is a bit of a roll of the dice, and I think actually having a high squad turn in January can be counterproductive. And in past years, I look at the likes of Tom Pett, James Wilson, arguably Tom Hopper, who have arrived in the January, taken a couple of months to get going, and by the time they've got going, you've only got a month or 2 of the season left, and it may be a little bit too late. So it's a real risk for clubs to put everything on the January transfer window. I think you've got to be clever. You've got to strengthen where you need to strengthen. But if you overhaul, you could be causing more problems than you're solving. So it's an intricate squad surgery, I like to say.
Yeah, it was an intricate thing to say as well. You navigated it pretty well, Gary. Kate Jackson says, afternoon, guys. Hope you're well. Best mid-season signing was Richard Butcher back in November, whereas we would have gone down a year earlier without Chris Hurd and David Sommer, not to forget Jamie Forrester dragging us in to the 2005-06 playoffs. I mean, Gary, what a player Richard Butcher was.
He was. He would have. I think it would have been his 40th birthday yesterday as well, which makes it even more tragic. We seem to have been without him for so long. He was a super signing. I seem to remember he came, I think, from Kettering, and just put a little bit of additional quality into that 2002-03 squad. And nobody can forget his goal at Bournemouth, which actually sent us to the playoffs and ultimately defeat at Bournemouth as well. Interesting there, Kate picked out Jamie Forrester. Hadn't immediately sprung to mind. But I felt during Keith's tenure as manager, he was constantly looking for that perfect striker. And sadly, just 2 or 3 months before he left us, I think he found him.
Comments coming in thick and fast on this one. Jake Tong says, loved Lee Angol coming in when the National League came in, made a huge impact on the campaign. Certainly did. The Forest Green Rovers home game springs to mind specifically on that one. Marcus Needham, great to hear from you. Marcus says, got to be Phil Stant for me, was a fab uplifting signing. And Jordan Brown, great to hear from Jordan, says Jamie Forrester Summers, the best I've seen on loan, so won't be far behind. Chris Hurd and Nathan Baker, also quality too. Yeah, do keep your comments coming in regarding that one. Seems like an interesting topic. Plenty of you getting involved. Great to hear and see. Right, Gary, let's look back at the Peterborough United game then, 2 weeks ago this afternoon. What did you make of it?
It was a tough start, wasn't it? Peterborough looked to be showing their quality, but they were all growl and no bite. I mean, we've gifted them the goal early doors, which I think that's a byproduct almost of playing out from the back. It was a little bit of a comedy of errors, even with being cleared off the line and obviously into Ioma, I think it was. But I think once we stopped affording them the respect and we started playing our game and 1 or 2 of our players found their stride, I actually thought that we deserved to win the game. And that's without the red card and without the missed penalty. I think that we did enough probably to take 3 points. So I was disappointed to come away with a point, and I would have been delighted with it at the beginning of the game. Yeah,
it was more good football, wasn't there? As you mentioned there, Peterborough came flying out the traps. We expected that. Michael Appleton said that in his pre-match press conference. I guess it was about just weathering that storm, and of course, could have gone on and won that game.
Yeah, exactly. I was delighted for Anthony Scully. I think he's had a fantastic couple of months. Took his goal very, very well. I think after we scored, there was only going to be one winner. I thought the referee had a decent game, and I know there was quite a few Peterborough fans who felt otherwise. But that just shows how subjective football is. They can't have a complaint with the red card. They can't have a complaint with the penalty award. I don't think, as Lincoln fans, we can complain about George Grant missing the penalty. Footballers miss penalties. That happens. And George has been a phenomenal campaigner for us. I think what's really heartening is when you look at the league table, Peterborough are one of the sides you expect not just to be in the top 6, you expect them to be challenging the top 2. I had them down as title winners. I thought they looked ordinary despite the talent that they've got in their squad. We're getting the most out of a small squad. They're not getting the most out of a really talented, impressive looking squad.
I thought George Grant ran the show as well. I mean, you see him on the ball there. His first pass was excellent. That pass was pretty exceptional at League One level. Obviously missing the penalty. He came out and tweeted after the game, didn't he? But so many Lincoln fans, responding to him saying, look, do not let that, get yourself down after a performance like that. There's nothing to be downhearted about, and rightly so.
Yeah, quite right. I remember John Akindi missing a penalty. Might have been Notts County, and people were on his back. And a lot of people were on his back because they felt that in the rest of the 90 minutes, perhaps the effort wasn't always there, rightly or wrongly. I think with George Grant, when he misses a penalty, he's in so much credit with us. He could miss everyone he takes between now and the end of the season. Nobody could really get on his back. I mean, he's been one of the surprise stars of the season. Because when you look at Michael's overhaul in the summer, when you look at George going off against Wimbledon last season, you felt that he might not be the type of player that was going to grow into the Michael Appleton side. But he's come out this year. He looks a complete footballer. I mean, he is a wonderful footballer. In my mind, he's as good, if not better, than Peter Gain. And that's basically like me saying I love him more than my parents. Massive for this football club. Wonderful player.
But not only that, Gary, it says a lot about George, doesn't it? He could have settled on the type of player that he is. And he's getting towards the prime age of his career now. He's not 21, he's not 22. He could have said, look, this is the type of game that I play. But actually, he's decided to elevate himself, and that says a lot.
Yes, he does. I think he says a certain amount about his age and his personal circumstances as well. Obviously, he's just had his first child. He's settling down. I think sometimes as a younger player, you're looking to prove yourself, and you tend to get the younger flair players, certainly, who want to impress by going past players, by putting the pass in, by scoring the spectacular goal. But I think then as you mature, probably, if you're in the right frame of mind, you begin to put that to one side and think about the greater good. And you can see that in George. He tracks back. He works phenomenally hard. But he's never taken away the flair element as well. He's found that perfect balance between learning, developing and becoming a more experienced professional, but he still has the little turn, the little flick, the bit of style and panache that football fans just love to see.
Regarding your favourite mid-season Lincoln City signings, Dustin says got to be Danny Rowe the second time round, coming on against Grimsby and getting McKeown his marching orders. The boy was electric. Yeah, he certainly was. Danny Rowe scored some brilliant goals, didn't he? He was a great addition to the side at the time. Steve O'Dare says, afternoon, gents. David Sommer for me as well. Today's game, 3-1 win for the Imps. Start of a very important week for you. Well, good luck with the week, Steve, whatever you're up to, no doubt about that. Kate Jackson says, we're the better side against Peterborough, looking back at the Peterborough game. Other than those first 20 minutes, Palmer had precisely nothing to do. And Steph Wright has commented as well, of course, former Lincoln City chairman Steph Wright. Matchday Live streaming into the virtual sports bar, www.collab.org.uk/sports bar. Yeah, brilliant initiative from Steph Wright and his team there. Well worth checking out. We're going to be speaking to Alan Long very shortly. I believe he's waiting in the wings. He's just sat down because I can see him waiting in the virtual green room. So if he's ready, let's bring him straight in. Alan, how are you? Great to see you. Are you ready, first of all?
Sorry?
Are you ready, first of all? I could see you were stood up there milling around.
I'm always ready. I've been ready all my life for this moment. Yeah, I'm all set, ready to go. So fire away.
He says as he's doing his collar up.
What's
the mood like? What's the mood like at the LNER Stadium? Of course, today myself and Gary Hutchinson not there. So give us an insight, give the fans an insight onto what we're all missing out on this afternoon.
Well, I'm going to be honest. It's very quiet. There's not too many people out there. I've just been outside, and the Northampton team bus has just turned up. So obviously we've got a team to play, which is a bonus. It's a sort of a greyish day weather-wise as well. It's not a particularly nice day. So I think the atmosphere is quiet, shall we say. But those of us that are here are all fit, ready, raring to go, and expecting, I think, probably a tougher game than we got just before Christmas down at their place.
Al, it's a question a lot of people that are going to games are getting asked by those of us who are not going to games at the moment, but fairly obvious one. But what is it like being there without the fans? Can you hear every ball being kicked? Can you hear shouting from the touchline? It seems to be that a lot of people going to games, whether it's in the Premier League or in the lower echelons, are saying that. Is that true?
Oh yeah, it's really a strange atmosphere. You can hear every ball being kicked. You can hear every comment being made, which, as you can imagine, sometimes that's actually quite an interesting insight into how football works, because you are hearing, for instance, you hear a lot more from the goalkeeper, Alex Palmer, very vocal, and obviously if there's a decision that a refs make that coaches don't agree with, you tend to hear that as well. I mean, for me, it's when if somebody has a shot and it hits the advertising hoardings, you hear that, whereas obviously you never hear that during a normal match day. So it's a surreal, weird existence. It's like watching. Remember when we used to go? Well, you probably won't because you're not old enough. But we used to have reserve games on a Wednesday afternoon, and fans could go along and watch a game against, I don't know, Newcastle's third team or something. Pay £1 to get in, and it's a bit like going to one of those games where there's just a lack of atmosphere, and when a goal goes in, a few people politely clap.
In terms of Northampton, then, Al, I mean, how do you see today's game going?
Well, I was fortunate enough to go down to Northampton just before Christmas with Charlie as part of the media team, and as you remember, they had fans in, and I remember at the time thinking that was going to affect us. Probably the fact that they had fans, it would affect them as well, and in fact, it was the opposite way around. I think we started really, really quickly in that game, dominated from start to finish. They couldn't handle our pace. They stuck to their long ball game, basically, and it didn't work that afternoon. And in fact, the fans got on their backs, and it probably went against them. Obviously, they won't get that today. I expect a bit of a reaction because they didn't play particularly well that day. So I would expect them to come out a little bit more fired up, if you like. I don't think they'll change the way they play because that's the way Keith Carroll plays. So it's one of those. It's a tough one for us because we tend to not play quite so well against teams that don't let us play, and I don't think they'll let us play today. But on the other hand, we've got some really exciting players who've got pace, and they certainly couldn't handle Brennan on the day just before Christmas, and I would expect that to be the case again today.
Just finally then, Al, I don't know if you caught the start of this afternoon's Matchday Live, but we're talking all things mid-season signings. Plenty of comments coming in thick and fast. Gary Hutchinson picked David Sommer as one of his standout ones. When you look back, which ones stand out for you?
I'd have to agree with Gary. I mean, David Sommer had a fantastic effect, didn't he? He came in and we didn't really know much about him, and he was an absolutely brilliant signing for the club. And I think we all thought he was going to go on and really play at the highest possible level, and probably would have done. But he Gary got a bad injury, didn't he? And that scuppered him. So trying to think who's come in mid-season and who's had there's a lot who haven't had an effect. A lot of players, they come in and it doesn't really work out for them. But I'd say David Sommer, or David as we called him, he would have the biggest impact on that particular season. He was a tremendous player.
Good stuff, Al. We'll let you finish with a score prediction this afternoon.
Well, I think it'll be tighter than the game down at Northampton, but I can't see anything other than an Imps win. I'll go for 2-0.
Great stuff. Al, really appreciate your time. Al's going to be giving his pre-match team news live right bang on 2 o'clock this afternoon, so do stay tuned for that. Thanks, Al.
Pleasure, as always.
Right, Gary, let's have a look back at the game against Accrington Stanley then in the EFL Trophy, because it was one of the performances of the season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Surprised me because obviously we were down to the bare bones, but from start to finish we were absolutely excellent. It was probably as close to a first team. I know one or two players like Zach Elbazedi got a bit of a run out, but it was a very, very full strength, very strong side rather. We just attacked with pace. We attacked with verve. We could perhaps have been 3-0 up before the first goal went in. I mean, Zach could certainly have had 2. It was just excellent. It was a great watch from start to finish, and it really showed our pace and our attacking intent. I fancy us in this competition. I've said it ever since the group stages, and I still believe that.
Yeah, some move, particularly by Zach Elbazedi there, who'll be chatting about shortly. There just seemed to be so much hunger from the Imps on this game, and you look at it and you think, okay, it's the EFL Trophy. You've got the league, you're going great guns in the league. A fairly average performance would have been forgiven, but it was anything but. Yeah,
it certainly wouldn't have been forgiven by supporters who want to win every single game. I think these clubs that devalue the EFL Trophy by saying they don't want to win it, by saying they're not bothered when they get knocked out, for me, that starts to breed a kind of a losing mentality almost. There's one or two clubs who've said, well, we're not bothered, we're out of this. It's a competition, and you play football to win. It doesn't matter whether you're in the EFL Trophy, League One, whether you're playing down the park with your mates. Every single one of those players wants to win the games they play in. And if that isn't a message that's coming down from the top, then for me, it's the wrong message. These players, they're winners. And, if you go and lose a game like this, but you've won 2 on the trot in the league, you've then got an L in your a loss in your kind of fixture column. And that's not good enough for a successful side. So I thought it was brilliant that not only did we play well, we were ruthless through to the 90th minute, and we never let up. And bear in mind, Accrington were flying high, brought 5 first-team players on, I think, in the second half, and they still didn't get anywhere near us.
I said that we'd talk about Zach Elbazedi, Gary, so let's do just that then. He's gone on loan to Bolton Wanderers. Quite the world we're living in now, isn't it, where the Imps are loaning out players to a club the size of Bolton, I guess, but, no complaints, and a good move for Zach as well.
Yeah, fantastic. If you pick any side from League Two for one of our players to go to, I think you'd probably want it to be Bolton. They're a big club. They've had Premier League football recently. They still have that mentality around the place. They should be doing well in that division as well. I think for Zach, he needs first-team football. When we've seen those glimpses of him in the EFL Trophy, he has looked superb. But other than that, he's had the odd cameo. Forest Green in the FA Cup sticks out, where I think he missed a shot quite late on, and I think that affected perception of him a little bit. I liked an interview I think he did with the Bolton News afterwards, where he basically said, next season anything's on the table. I come here to get games, and the plan is then to come back to Lincoln, I think, and try and force himself into contention. The thing with Zach is that he's very much about pace. So there's other elements of his game he's got to develop. And when we talked about George Grant earlier, we were talking about developing as footballers. Well, bear in mind, Zach is 3 or 4 years behind. But he's a very clever man. He's a very intelligent, quietly spoken man. And I think that he'll take it, hopefully, as a springboard to kick his career on.
Not seeing many score predictions this afternoon. I think everyone's getting a bit carried away with the transfers, which is great. But do let us know what you think the score is going to be at the LNER Stadium this afternoon. I'll do my best to read them out throughout the show. Gary, let's talk about Robbie Gotts then, because another player that's gone out on loan. He's gone out on loan to Salford, or I'd say gone on loan. He's gone back to Leeds technically, and then gone out on loan to Salford. What did you make of that one?
It was interesting, and especially as he scored, I think, and got man of the match for Salford last night, playing in midfield. I think Robbie was a victim of circumstance, and you always get that at a football club. In the past, I talk about the likes of Sean Long, who, good players, just didn't quite get the chance. James Wilson came in, good player, but didn't get the chance due to the fact that he was coming into a winning side, that his position wasn't quite defined. And I think that was the problem Robbie had. He wasn't our first choice right back. That was TJ Ioma. Robbie had a horrendous debut against Portsmouth, where he was just turned inside out in the first half, and the game was beyond us. And he also wasn't ever going to get a regular run in midfield, because we've got Bridcut Jones, Grant McGrandles, Theo Eden can play there as well. So he was one of at least 6 vying for a midfield position. Throw Remy Howarth in, for instance, there's 7. So he was that victim of where can you possibly play him? Anthony Scully had a similar problem at the beginning of the season, but every time he got an opportunity, he seized it. I think with Robbie, there was 2 or 3 games where he didn't quite do it. Then when he did pop in, he looked good, but by then he was always on the fringes. So it's probably a good move for him.
Yeah, good points, Gary. Can't argue with it. Score predictions coming in thick and fast now. George says 2-0 to the Imps. Jacob Langham. Jacob says, I'm going for 2-1 to the Imps this afternoon. Ian Hodgson says 3-1. Steve Sands 3-0. Stephen Hudson 2-0. Keith Fletcher says 3-0 to Lincoln. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Morgan Rogers if he starts. Well, seamlessly, Keith, you've created a nice segue for me there to ask Gary about Morgan Rogers. Gary, I'll do that now. What did you make of Morgan when he came on against Peterborough, particularly?
Yeah, it's hard to form a solid opinion because he didn't get an awful lot of time, but I thought he looked really energetic, lively, direct on the ball. I think there was one move where him and Brennan weren't quite on the same wavelength, whereas if they had been, it may have been 2-1 and game over. I think he showed what we believe that we're going to get from him. We believe we're going to get Brennan Johnson on the other flank. We know what Brennan's got. He runs at players. He makes them panic. He frightens them. He finds the gaps. And I think we're going to expect that with Morgan as well. If he starts in the same lineup as Brennan Johnson, I'll go on record now as saying I don't think that there will be a better wide pairing in League One all season. Genuinely, they're 2 players who will frighten every single team we come up against. So we're going to have to capitalise on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those signings, isn't it, Gary, that just breeds excitement. We've mentioned that figure of £4 million that Man City paid before. Yes, a hefty price tag comes with a bit of pressure on him, but there shouldn't be, because he's such a young player, and Michael will give him the freedom to play, because we've seen that with Brennan Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. A price tag is brilliant for us pundits and for people in the media, because it allows you to label a player and talk about a player in monetary terms. But, Morgan Rogers, he doesn't have that pressure coming here. All he's got to do is get more senior experience. If he had a bad loan spell here, arguably he'll still get a second and a third chance. You look at Ben Woodburn at Liverpool, who had a huge price tag on him, kind of went away to Sheffield United. It didn't work out, but he still got loan deals after. Still had the reputation after. But what Morgan will have the price tag in his head a little bit. He will know what his ability is. He will know what his potential is, and he wants to show it. This is a lad that wants to play for Manchester City, arguably one of the best teams in the country. Sorry to Liverpool and Man United fans, but they'll win the title this year. And he wants to go back there and follow in the footsteps of the likes of Phil Foden and prove himself in the Premier League. He doesn't do that by coming here and scoring 1 goal in 20 games and getting 20 minutes at the end. He comes here by starting games, scoring goals, getting us promoted, and going back with a bigger reputation than he arrived.
It's going to be a barrage of angry tweets heading your way, Gary Hutchinson, from Manchester United and Liverpool fans. Treading on thin ice a little bit there. Rob Evans says 5-0 Lincoln, give the rest of the league a clear message to what we are about. Cy James says 4-0 to the Imps. Ryan Whelan 4-0 to the Imps as well. And my mate Andrew Reeve says 3-1 to the mighty Imps as well. Let's now hear from David Kerslake, because there was no Michael Appleton in his pre-match press conference yesterday. This is what the assistant had to say.
David, first off, we'll talk about what's happened midweek in terms of the table. It's the first time in a long time Lincoln aren't top going into the weekend. Are you as a management team taking much note of the results as they come in week by week?
Of course, we all look at the results. We're fully aware that we've been bumped off the top, but it makes no difference. We've got our own way of going about it. We know that our points tally that we need to hit, and right now, thankfully, we're bang on course.
We're heading towards the halfway point of the season. Have the expectations changed because of how well this first half of the season has gone?
I would say yes, particularly because we've now played probably most of the teams. We've been in them games, all but a couple. We feel that we've progressed as a team, as individuals. But the way they've, whatever players have had to come in, I've said, I said this last week, the gaffer drills them from Monday onwards, so everybody knows their role and responsibility in the team. It's just that we've picked up some really fabulous results, and right now we're full of confidence, but we know the amount of hard work that's in front of us. But definitely we're ahead of the game at the minute.
You've been involved in coaching quite a while now. How does this group compare in terms of how they're taking on that information and progressing compared to other groups of players you've worked with in the past?
Well, that's the really nice feeling about this group, that up until in midweek we were sat top. The gaffer and I, along with Rich and Steve, they're really focused, really focused, and that's the most important thing. They're a good, honest group. They're humble. And whatever the gaffers putting up, challenges we're putting in front of them at the minute, they're coming up trumps. But it's due to their hard work. That's the real good feeling amongst us staff.
Northampton Town, obviously not too long since we last played them and had a comfortable victory. Have they changed much? I know they've had a couple of good results in the last couple of weeks. Has Keith Curl changed anything there, or is it just about the look changing for them?
They've bought Morris in from Portsmouth, and a young striker, Edmondson from Leeds. So they've had a couple of decent signings. Keith's sides are always really well organised. He'll get them up for the fight. So we're expecting, as we were when we went down to Sixfields, they'll come up here and they'll give it a real good go. And we're going to have to be on our A game for sure.
Yeah, David Kerslake speaking to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace there. And Gary, he was asked towards the end of that segment about the fact that he's obviously been there and done it. David Kerslake is a very experienced assistant manager or manager in his time, or part of coaching staff as well. And what he said about the Imps taking on the information, I thought was something that really stood out there. It's something that, it gives a bit of insight. We've not heard Michael necessarily say that before, but it just gives you an idea of how well things are going at the moment.
Yeah, it does. And I think as fans, you can almost see the evidence of that as well. Whatever a manager or assistant manager tells you about the squad, how they perform on a Saturday probably tells you more. You see if they're coherent. You see if when a player switches from holding midfield to attacking midfield, if he adapts and changes his game. And I think we've commented on Matchday Live in the past that Lewis is raking 40-yard balls. When he was out and Joe Walsh came in, Walsh was Paul Yeoma, I think it was playing the same balls. So they know the pattern of play. It's quite clear, I think, that the players are taking it on. And David Kerslake has worked, I believe he was assistant manager at Cardiff, for instance, to Malky Mackay. So it's nice to hear him saying that they're a group that continue to impress him. Obviously, he's an experienced man and he recognises that.
Team news with you in around about 30 seconds time, just with regards to the mid-season signings. Emily Rook has given us a great shout. Matt Gilks, I should say, stands out for me. That's a great shout, isn't it, Gary? Matt came in, such an experienced head, and did great things.
He did, yeah. I mean, obviously the save at MK Dons just before Bruno went up to the top and got the second goal that effectively sealed the title was very good. But I thought that he was a calming influence when he came in. Obviously, we'd had issues with Josh being injured, and Matt Gilks was a phenomenal signing. I think he's at Bolton now. And one that occurred to me, actually, I think Gareth Ainsworth signed in the middle of the season as well. And he wasn't bad in the long run, was he?
Yeah, that in itself is a massive shout as well, Gary. Right, it's 2:00, which means one thing and one thing only. We can get the team news with Adam Long, who's pitch side at the LNER Stadium.
Hi Sam, yeah, thanks. Welcome to pitch side. It's a little bit damp and a bit grey, but there's the team sheets have come through and there's a number of changes. So we've got Tom Hopper, Joe Walsh and Morgan Rogers starting for the Imps, and on the bench James Jones, Harry Anderson and Conor McGrandles make a return. So the starting lineup is number 1 Alex Palmer, at 22 TJ Ioma, at 5 Adam Jackson, 16 Joe Walsh, 7 Teo Eden, Liam Bricott is at 23, number 10 George Grant, 20 Brendan Johnson, number 11 Anthony Scully, Morgan Rogers is at number 27, and number 9 Tom Hopper. On the bench for the Imps today, 31 is Sam Long, number 3 Max Melbourne, number 8 James Jones, number 17 Remy Howarth, number 18 Conor McGrandles, and 26 Harry Anderson. Just run through the starting lineup again: Alex Palmer, TJ Ioma, Adam Jackson, Joe Walsh, Teo Eden, Liam Bricott, George Grant, Brendan Johnson, Anthony Scully, Morgan Rogers and Tom Hopper. That's it. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much indeed to Alan Long there, giving us the Lincoln City team news. I'll give you the Northampton Town team news very shortly as well. But Gary, in terms of team news so far this season, this has to be one of the biggest in terms of a change of formation. It looks like a 4-2-3-1. Talk us through it.
Yeah, it certainly does, doesn't it? I mean, Tom Hopper's going to obviously be the 9, but then I think we're going to have a 3 behind him: Johnson, Scully and Rogers. I would imagine Rogers on the left, and then Johnson and Scully, potentially Scully through the middle, Johnson on the right, or vice versa. Very, very attacking. And I think given the ease with which we picked them off last time and the gaps between their back 4 and midfield, I think we're looking probably to exploit that. So, I mean, what an array of talent that is. Morgan Rogers starting today is going to delight a lot of Lincoln fans.
Yeah, we've seen a comment coming in from Richard Godson saying no Monsma. Yeah, it's something that David Kerslake mentioned yesterday, that it was unlikely that he was going to start. We'll talk about Joe Walsh very shortly. But Gary, I will ask you about just Morgan Rogers, just to go on with that. I know we chatted about him just before the team news, but in terms of position this afternoon, where do you see him playing, and maybe how will that relate to Anthony Scully?
I think he's going to play on the left. I put my head above the parapet to be shot out, but I think with his pace, his direct running, I can see him being on the left. I'd like to see Scully in the 10 and Brennan on the right, but then we've seen Brennan through the centre already this season. He's dangerous. I think Michael's always wanted to play a 4-2-3-1. He played it when he was at Oxford. But it's about having the right number 10. It's about having a number 10 who wants to play with the game, looking at the game, having it ahead of him, and then getting in, overlapping, and potentially even switching to a kind of a 4-4-2 at times. So you get somebody in and around Tom Hopper as well. And we know Tom will work outside the box. If that happens, the player behind him is the one that needs to get in. So I think we could see a much more potent attacking threat. And when you consider we scored kind of 9 goals in 2 games over Christmas, that's particularly frightening.
Yeah, comments coming in thick and fast in relation to the team news as well. Carl Beach says, pleased that Rogers is starting, more pace with him, Scully and Johnson. Yeah, pace, certainly a word that we're going to see a lot of this afternoon. Cornell says, brilliant change of formation from Michael Appleton. And Adam Kirk says, see it and thought the same. Definitely looks like a 4-2-3-1. Gary, I mean, if you look at Anthony Scully, look at Brendan Johnson. Okay, we've only seen Morgan Rogers fleetingly, but they're fluid players, aren't they? So where they may start the game doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they're going to finish. You know, they like to get in and around that attacking part of the pitch and play in different areas, which is just, brilliant for us to watch, but it makes it difficult for the opposition as well.
Yeah, massively. To coin an Alan Partridge phrase, it's liquid football, because we've got players that will just move around and swirl around wherever they need to, I think. If the mood takes them. And I think, if you play Brendan Rodgers, for instance, at 10, he's going to be looking to get ahead of Tom Hopper. If the opportunity comes for him to get out on one of the flanks, he will do. And then you'll see Anthony Scully pulling inside because, Scully likes to do that. He likes to be in the channel. He likes to be coming through the centre. And we can rotate at will. So if one winger isn't getting much change out of a particular fullback, we can probably look to change that as well. For instance, Johnson and Rogers maybe wanting to go on the outside, or Scully may want to come on the inside. So if we've got a fullback with a weaker foot, we can look to exploit that. So it is really attacking. It's interesting because so many people say we need to sign an attacker in the January transfer window. But I don't think I will have ever seen a more potent looking attack on paper start for Lincoln City than this afternoon.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point as well, Gary. It's going to be an exciting game, I think, no doubt about that. Right, I said I'd give you the Northampton Town team news. Here it is. Jonathan Mitchell's in goal for them. It's Michael Harriman, Cian Bolger, former Imp, of course, is captain this afternoon. Lloyd Jones, the former Liverpool Academy graduate as well. Joseph Mills plays. Sean McWilliams, Bryn Morris, Jack Sowerby, Sam Hoskins, Mikael Miller, and Ryan Edmondson. And those three new starters that David Kerslake mentioned all do start for Northampton Town this afternoon. And judging by the response to their Twitter account, their fans are pretty pleased with that as well, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, I like Ryan Edmondson. He's a player that came through Leeds under 23s. And think Robbie Gotts, but up top, he's got like that pedigree. I've not seen too much of Miller, but Bryn Morris from Portsmouth is a good, solid League One acquisition. Certainly, if you're at the wrong end of the table, there's no harm whatsoever in taking somebody from the fringes of a team at the right end. Michael Harriman's someone that I've always kept an eye on as well. He was here on trial, I think, in the summer of 17-18. He'd been formerly at Wickham and then kind of left and's gone on to do very well. Like I've said, this is going to be a very different Northampton Town. I think there'll be more attacking threat from them. Obviously, Miller and Edmonton. I think Sam Hoskins is playing as well, who's a player I quite like. But then they had Nicky Adams last time he's left. He pulled the strings in midfield. So it might be a good time to play them, because if those new players are going to come good, it might not happen in the first game.
In the Facebook comments, Jake Tongs raised a really good point, Gary. Throw Callum Morton amongst that, and we're going to look pretty deadly going forward. Yeah, I guess at some stage it's easy to forget about Callum Morton because he only played a few minutes for the Imps, but he looked great, didn't he? And the idea that he could come back in and sort of offer something different as well is quite scary, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think we've got to look probably beyond the normal season as well, because in a realistic world, there's 6 teams looking to get into the playoffs. 4 teams in the playoffs, 2 for automatics. And I think we're probably in with a better shout of the playoffs than automatics. So then you're thinking, well, we get Callum Morton back in late February, early March. He has 3 months playing with the side. Then it is another dimension. And he will be like a new signing when he comes back. So it is exciting. Yeah, absolutely so. It's just how Michael keeps everybody happy, how he keeps everybody firing and everybody fit. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks.
Talked about raising good points in the Facebook comments. Richard Harrison has done just that as well. He says, anyone criticising Gary about his Premier League prediction should ask themselves, should I be watching a programme about Lincoln City? Very good point indeed, Richard. And just for the record, I was only joking when I said Manchester United fans and Liverpool fans would be giving Gary Hutchinson a barrage of tweets, as he well knows. Gary, let's talk about Joe Walsh then, because he starts alongside Adam Jackson this afternoon. No Lewis Monster as well. We'll hear from Joe very shortly. What do you make of that?
I've got no complaints and no worries whatsoever. I think when Adam Jackson has played alongside Lewis, he's looked assured, confident, experienced. When Joe Walsh has played, he's looked exactly the same. So, obviously Lewis has written the headlines because he's scored plenty of goals. But as we've just said and we've just kind of examined, I think we've got goals from players in the forward positions. And what we've actually got in Jackson and Walsh are 2 solid, experienced League One and above centre halves. There will be absolutely no complaints from me whatsoever. I think they'll slot in together nicely. They will have played together in training. They'll know their roles. We're in a great position where we can lose a player like Lewis Monsma from the first team and not feel that the defence is makeshift. And when I look at that defence, it feels as strong perhaps as any combination of 4 players that we've got.
Absolutely. I said we'd hear from Joe Walsh. We can do that now. These are his pre-match thoughts.
Joe, first off, it must be nice to be back in action after Tuesday's postponement. And obviously, it's been a frustrating couple of weeks trying to get games in, hasn't it?
Yeah, I know, yeah. It's been frustrating, obviously, not to that game getting called off on Tuesday with the waterlogged pitch. But, it is what it is. And everyone's had games called off this season. I think this is our time. We had a couple of games called off, and now we can crack on again.
Is it hard as a player to get that news when you like fans, like anybody, waiting in the morning to find out if the game's going to go ahead or not?
Yeah, just preparing for the game like normal, and like before, and then in the morning, and then to get a text saying the game's off is a bit of a downer. But then we have to go straight into training then, and did our stuff and carried on as normal.
Northampton, obviously, we not played them too long ago and got a positive result. How hard is it not to be complacent, though, coming up against a side that you beat comfortably not too long ago?
Yeah, I think they picked up a bit since then. And I know, yeah, it's going to be a tough game. It's always a tough game playing against them, like direct. Yeah, it's going to be a tough game again. We've got to be ready, and like last time, be ready for it, and make sure we can stand up to it.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow potentially you line up with Adam Jackson at the heart of the defence. I can't remember too many times you two have played alongside each other. It seems to be the missing partnership, I think, so far this season. Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I was saying to him, I've been in and out for about 5 months and I haven't played with him. So, yeah, looking forward to it. And obviously played together in training and everything, but it's not the same. But yeah, it's going to be, looking forward to it.
And how do you think you two complement each other in terms of the way you play?
I don't know, really. I have to wait and see. I don't know. So, yeah, I think you just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, Joe Walsh there leaving us all to guess, I guess, Gary. He seems like a pretty jovial character, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's talking with a smile on his face, wasn't he? If they'd ever do a Lincoln City amateur production of Batman with that smile, he could play the Joker.
Absolutely. Who would we play, Gary? That's the question.
I have no idea. Who were Waldorf and Statler? They weren't Batman, but they could make a guest appearance.
I'm sure the comments will fly in for that one, no doubt. Steve O'Dare has raised a good point. He says, look, there's going to be a lot of rotation on the pitch. I know it's something we talked about briefly before, but in terms of that rotation on the pitch, forgetting Rodgers and Scully, who we've mentioned, maybe in terms of the midfield and that two just behind the three in the 4-2-3-1 that we seem to think it is, what do you expect?
Well, somewhere you've got to have stability. We're not kind of Ajax. We're not playing total football where everybody plays anywhere. And I think for any good League One side, you do have to have stability. So you're not going to expect Liam Bridcut to be roaming too far away from that kind of middle bit of the park where he's going to be winning the ball. George Grant can always push forward a little bit more, but they're going to have a threat. They're going to carry a threat. So you do need to be organised at the back. I don't expect to see a great amount of fluidity there. The fullbacks will get forward, and Bridcut normally sits and often drops them back into those fullback roles. I think we saw it against Peterborough, where TJ Ioma had made a run forward, and when Peterborough then burst the other way, it was Liam Bridcut filling in. So you've got to have that player kind of mopping up. I think he used to be a sweeper in defence, but now it tends to be the defensive midfielder who fills in. I expect us to be resolute at the back. All good buildings are built on strong foundations, and then up front we can express ourselves.
Yeah, let me just remind you of that Lincoln City starting 11 then. I know you can see it going along across the ticker, but in terms of the formation, I'll give you it here. Alex Palmer in goal, TJ Ioma, Adam Jackson and Joe Walsh, the centre-back pairing. No Lewis Monsman this afternoon. Teo Eden at left-back. Liam Bridcut's back in the side, as well as George Grant, Brennan Johnson as well, Anthony Scully, Rodgers and Hopper. So if you're just joining us, it's looking like a 4-2-3-1 for Michael Appleton's side this afternoon. Arguably, the manager's most attacking formation so far this season. On the bench, it's Long, Melbourne, Jones, Howarth, McGrandles and Anderson. And Gary, just on McGrandles, great to have him back in the squad, because in the couple of occasions that Lincoln have dropped points over the last sort of 3 weeks or so, the reoccurring theme has been, have we perhaps missed one of McGrandles in there? So great just to have him back in the squad.
Yeah, it is. He works incredibly hard. I'd love to see some stats of ground covered, because when he's on the field, he looks to cover every blade of grass, and I'm sure his GPS reading is incredibly impressive. I think you can say similar in terms of how nice it is to have players back in James Jones and Harry Anderson, both of whom have missed games recently. We've got two of what would probably be considered our four strongest midfielders sat on the bench, and we're kind of enthusing about the players that we do have. So we're in the middle of a January transfer window, and right now you look at that squad and think, well, if we were to sign somebody, where's it going to be? They're going to have to sort of sit on the bench and wait for their turn. It's going to make it incredibly difficult for anyone coming in other than cover, because we're not going to pick up another Morgan Rodgers. Not a player of that calibre, I don't think.
Going to be speaking to a League One expert very shortly from the D3-D4 podcast, helping us preview some of the other big games in the division this afternoon. Before we do, let's have a reminder of what happened when the Imps faced Northampton Town at Sixfields around about a month or so ago. This is what happened. Yeah, that was Lincoln band The Rills with Morning Rain. It's more like afternoon snow or afternoon sleet here in the central of Lincoln at the moment. Should be a cold one at the LNER Stadium this afternoon. Gary, it was a physical encounter, that one, wasn't it, to say the least?
Yeah, of course, the highlights are never going to show the elbow on Lewis Monsma, which left him with a black eye. I think the highlights were actually quite generous to Northampton there. Those two efforts in the first half that looked extremely generous when they were included. Look, it wasn't an easy afternoon. People look back and see 4-0, wow, we absolutely dominated the game. But they are a strong side. I'm not saying physical and dirty. You know, they're strong on the ball, they're good in the air, or certainly they should be good in the air at the back. And I think they'll have a little bit more to offer going forward as well. It was an interesting afternoon. I think the fans got on their back quite quickly, and that probably contributed a little bit to the 2 late goals as well. So expect a cagier affair.
Yeah. A fair point indeed. Right, let's now speak to James Richards from the D3, D4 podcast, a League One and League Two expert. James, great to have you on the show. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to seeing Oxford play for the first time in what seems like ages due to game postponements and COVID issues. It's crazy that it's been as long as it has. But yeah, thanks for having me on. No,
it's a pleasure. Yeah, so Oxford United fan, is that right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
What about? What about some of the overall fixtures then? Let's have a chat with you about them, if we may. We've got the fixtures there, so if we bring them into the fold and you can help us predict them, we'll have a very quick look at them now if we've got them. If not, I will just ask you about how you're seeing the League One table shaping up in the top 10 so far this afternoon.
Yeah, well, the big one is obviously Hull going to Portsmouth, isn't it? Portsmouth, crazy. They haven't conceded a goal since that away game against Blackpool on the 1st of December, I think it is. I know they had a big gap in play due to, like I say, due to COVID issues at the moment, which we're seeing quite often. But 6 matches now without conceding a goal for Portsmouth. Their home form is, as usual, pretty strong. And Kenny Jackett, I'm pleased to see him doing well because obviously I expect both you guys and a lot of your watchers will remember that he was under extreme pressure not that long ago simply because the style of football. But I think I'm probably, maybe sometimes to my detriment, an advocate of giving managers longer, not sacking them quickly, even when things aren't going too well. And I've never really seen the case to get rid of Kenny Jackett. I know that sometimes his football is a bit prohibitive, it's a bit defensive, sometimes too conservative for fans' liking, but he's got a great record. And in the end, I think he's compromised on some of that defensive football. He's got a great sort of system now with Marcus Hunt on the right and Callum Johnson behind him. Obviously, we know Ronan Curtis is excellent, and John Marquis is finally kind of find the form that they purchased him for. They knew what kind of scorer he was, and I don't think he was necessarily used properly during his first few months at the club, but he's a brilliant player, and I think they'll beat Hull today. It'd be interesting to see if they keep a clean sheet, because Gavin White is a great pickup from Hull. I was quite jealous, actually. He had one season with Oxford, was brilliant. We sold him to Cardiff, and now he's back on loan in League One with Hull. So I hope he does really well.
Just on that, James. Just whilst we're on Portsmouth Hull, because just in case you get onto another one, because I just wanted to put that to Gary. Your prediction that you think Portsmouth are going to beat Hull this afternoon, and just wondered if Gary went along with that.
Yeah, 100%. I think Portsmouth were far and away the best side we've seen at Sincilbank this season. James is quite right in that John Marquis is finding his feet now, and he didn't as much last season. There was a lot of criticism, again, of Jackett's approach. I really like Marcus Harness. I think he's a player that on his day is as good as any in League One. And I just think that Portsmouth are slowly but cautiously building. Interesting points about Kenny Jackett, because I think Pompey fans probably are looking further back in the past than they should. They're looking at their Premier League and FA Cup winning days and thinking we shouldn't be in League One, forgetting those seasons in League Two. Whereas actual fact, they've come into League One and established themselves as playoff contenders every single season, I believe, probably bar the first one. So I actually fancy Portsmouth today, but I think that both Hull and Portsmouth will be in the top 2 or 3 by the end of the season. I don't think either of them are going to suddenly find themselves falling away on the back of today's result.
Ipswich playing Peterborough, James. How do you see that one going this afternoon? Of course, Peterborough going through one of their better spells so far this season.
Yeah, again, I mean, looking at the form table, Ipswich are terrible. but it's not with Ipswich. There's far more going on than just on the pitch stuff. There's fans boycotting matches. There's fans quite clearly unhappy about how the team is being run by their chairman, and you kind of understand it. I mean, they've given Paul Lambert this long contract last season, 5-year contract, and his press conferences of late have been, I think he's banned a popular member of the local media, and his press conferences of late have been tetchy to say the least, blaming, I think, fans and supporters and some of the media for the negativity around the squad. But frankly, you look at the numbers. I did some analytics this week looking at League One specifically. The football doesn't, the football he is coaching and he is in charge of just does not tarry up with his idea that it's nothing to do with the football that is causing the unrest at the club. The fans are not stupid. They know their team should be doing better. And I think they see Paul Lambert as the problem. But I don't see him going anywhere. He's got the full support of the chairman still. Peterborough in great form, or slightly better form, I should say, than they were a while back. We know Peterborough very well. Everyone kind of expects, and we always do, we sort of think Peterborough will do really well, and then they have this dive, don't they? And it's kind of like, we call them the bottle jobs of League One, rightly or wrongly, but they do have this tendency to have poor form coming into the crunch months of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how they cope with that this year. But I expect them to beat Ipswich today. I think in the likes of Siriki Dembele, who is a much better player when the cameras aren't on, I think, and Sammy Smodics. I think they've got some, and obviously Johnson Clark-Harris has done well in terms of goal scoring. They've got enough players there to beat an Ipswich side who are woeful at the moment.
James, you're going to hate me, but I'm going to put you right on the spot here. You obviously know your stuff in League One. If you had to pick 3 to go up today, who would it be and why?
So I'd have Portsmouth winning the league. I just think they're an excellent team. I had Lincoln third in my pre-season predictions, and I'll probably keep them there, having Hull coming second. I think that's how I look at it at the moment. A lot can change, but I just think in terms of the 3 squads, and indeed the three managers who I like a lot in this division. But it's so exciting, isn't it? Because Doncaster are a team that don't get enough credit for what they're doing. Darren Moore has done a terrific job. But in terms of just looking at the squad on paper, I think the best depth goes to Portsmouth, and I think Hull have got a very good squad. And I just like Michael Appleton because he's a brilliant coach. Did wonders at Oxford. In fact, what he's doing at Lincoln almost exactly mirrors what he's now doing at what he did at Oxford. So it's kind of like no surprise whatsoever to Oxford fans that he's doing as well as he is.
James, really appreciate your time. Yeah, as you say, League One is wide open, isn't it? Just a quick one. Where can Lincoln City fans find your podcast?
On all the usual channels. I mean, we have a strong presence on Twitter, mainly for social media, but we're on Apple, Spotify, and it's always on our website, d3d4football.com.
d3d4football.com. Well worth a watch. James Richards, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Gary, interesting what he said there about Michael and the fact that it mirrors. I mean, we sort of know that as well, I guess, in terms of from what we've heard of Oxford United fans, but it's great to hear it, isn't it? Because he's known as a bit of a legend there now. Obviously, he's doing brilliant stuff here as well, but he's got a format when he's given the opportunity to go and get the type of players that he wants to get, and it clearly works.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I really liked what he did at Oxford. He took them to the EFL Trophy final 2 years in a row. They were right on the cusp of the playoffs. He brought players in and developed them. Things like Marvin Johnson, I might have got the name wrong. I think he came in and moved for decent money. Kamar Roof as well. So, he's certainly got an idea of what he wants to do. He's got a method, let's say, which was a word that was quite popular with our previous manager. So it's nice to see that. It's really nice to hear James speaking highly of him. It's nice to hear that at the beginning of the season he had us third, because believe me, he had a lot more belief in us and Michael and the squad than I think a lot of our fans did. I mean, I put us just outside the playoffs, and I thought I was being generous. So it's it is. It's just, I think when you're in the inside looking out, I think it's harder to be objective. So I think the rest of League One look at us and say, Appleton's doing what he does at Lincoln. They're making good signings. They're hard to beat. They score goals. Whereas we see every second of every minute. So we'll see a 10-minute patch of football where we go, we didn't create what we could have done there. Or we'll think back 10 years or 20, 30 years and think, well, we were in this position in 82, 83 and look what happened. So it's harder to be objective when you're on the inside looking out until 46 games are played.
Let me run you through the Lincoln City starting 11 once more then. Michael Appleton has made 3 changes to the side that beat Accrington Stanley around about 10 days or so ago in the EFL Trophy. It is Alex Palmer in goal, TJ Omer, Adam Jackson, Joe Walsh and Teo Eden make up the back 4. Slight change in formation this afternoon. We're looking at 2 midfield players, Liam Bridcut and George Grant. And then the 3, it's looking like Johnson, Scully and Rogers. And then it's Tom Hopper who returns to the side as well. And Gary, we haven't mentioned Tom Hopper really, but I mean, look, obvious question, but A, what does Tom Hopper offer, and B, what will he offer to this specific side of players that are so fluid and that we don't know quite where they're going to play? I guess with Tom, it's his pressing, isn't it?
Yeah, we know what Tom does. He presses from the front. So if Northampton tried to play out from the back, which they won't, but he would be beyond that. He's going to have to be winning aerial duels almost certainly. When they are looking at getting the ball and playing it forward, he's going to be closing down quickly. But he works hard. We know Tom works hard. At times that can be a kind of almost like a false positive, can't it? You can go, oh, well, he works hard because kind of covering over the fact that he doesn't do anything else. Tom does. He has scored a few goals. I think in the past, certainly in a 4-3-3, he's found himself having to come out of the area to find the ball and then leaving gaps in the area. I think he's a striker that's much better suited to play in a 4-2-3-1 because if he does come deep, if he does go wide, then you've got 3 players behind, so you've got much more likelihood of one of them filling the hole and filling the gap, particularly whoever's playing in the number 10. So I think this formation could probably be better for Tom Hopper than the 4-3-3, but he'll still cover every blade of grass. He'll still fight hard. You'll still find him defending when we're under pressure. And I'd just love to see him get a couple of goals. Yeah,
absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see, isn't it? Gary, we're nearly running out of time, but let's just have a look at the Imps' upcoming fixtures then. 5 of them. Portsmouth away. I mean, look, we don't need to tell you just how big that game is. Doncaster Rovers at home, Gillingham away, Hull City away, another massive one as well, and Accrington at home. It seems like another pivotal period coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And in between that Doncaster and Gillingham game, I would imagine there's the EFL Trophy game as well. Although with the Gillingham game now being Friday on TV, I'm not sure how that fixture will pile up. It is pivotal. You've got 4 teams there who are in and around the playoffs at the moment. Even in taking it in a smaller chunk between now and 5 o'clock next Friday, you've got 3 games, 2 against promotion rivals. Obviously, Portsmouth, who I think are over and above what we are now. Doncaster, who I think are our level right now. And Northampton today, with the greatest respect you would expect to beat. 3 very different challenges. We will go from 21 to 24 games in that pace of time. So we go over the halfway mark as well. This is a crucial week. Then you can look beyond that. I said, I think on Matchday Live before, I personally see groups of games. I see this group of games, this 3 groups of games as pivotal. 9 points, we're automatic promotion contenders. 5 or fewer, perhaps we can start thinking about the playoffs. But I don't think we'll get anything less than that.
Gary, your predictions have been pretty much spot on over the last few weeks. Are you giving one today?
I will, but I'm not sure whether it's what I truly believe. I'll go with a narrow Lincoln victory. I think it's going to be really, really tough today. I expect Ryan Edmondson to be a real handful for them, but I'm going to go for a narrow 2-1 Lincoln victory.
We'll take it. We'll take it indeed. Gary, really appreciate your time, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Great to hear the thoughts of Gary Hutchinson there. Right, half an hour to go until kickoff at the LNER Stadium. You can get your pass now by going to www.weareimps.com/I. Follow all the build-up with Michael Horton and Steve Thompson on BBC Radio Lincolnshire. Will Lincoln City finish today top of the League One table? We certainly hope so. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.